Sometimes the most revealing moments happen when nobody expects them. Not during a big interview. Not during an emotional sit-down special. Just an ordinary Monday morning on live television, in the middle of a conversation about something as small as a bottle of body oil. And yet, somehow, that small moment ended up telling us more about Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos than a dozen scripted segments ever could. It happened this past week on Live, during a pre-recorded episode that marked Kelly's return to the desk after a 2-week absence. The topic seemed harmless enough at first. Kelly mentioned a luxurious body oil she likes to use right after showering, while her skin is still damp. It's the kind of small, relatable beauty ritual millions of viewers could picture immediately. But before she could finish the thought, Mark jumped in with a single word that changed the tone of the whole exchange: slippery. And that's when Kelly said it. The line that's had viewers replaying the clip ever since. She admitted, half joking and half serious, that she already knows how her story ends. A slip in the shower, she said, will be the thing that finally gets her. Mark didn't laugh it off. He didn't change the subject. He simply agreed quietly, almost like he'd thought about it before too. It's a strange thing watching two people who've spent years building a public persona around glamour and banter suddenly land on something so unfiltered. There was no punchline waiting at the end of it. No cutaway to a laugh track moment. Just two spouses sitting side by side, acknowledging out loud that they think about how fragile life can be, even while joking about skincare. That's really the reason this clip traveled the way it did. It wasn't shocking. It wasn't scandalous. It was recognizable. Anyone who has ever caught themselves thinking half-jokingly about the ridiculous ways life could end, understood exactly what was happening on that screen. Viewers weren't watching two celebrities. For a few seconds, they were watching a married couple do what married couples do, which is finish each other's dark little jokes without missing a beat. What makes Kelly and Mark's dynamic so different from a typical talk show pairing is that there's no visible seam between the performance and the person. A lot of hosts have chemistry that feels rehearsed, even when it's genuine, because there's a professional distance holding it together. With Kelly and Mark, that distance simply isn't there. They've been married for nearly 3 decades. They've raised 3 children together. They've watched each other change jobs, change cities, change entire chapters of life. So when Mark interrupts her mid-sentence with one word, it isn't a comedic beat they rehearsed backstage. It's a habit built over a marriage, the kind of shorthand that only develops when two people have spent an enormous amount of time paying close attention to each other. That's worth sitting with for a second because it's easy to overlook. Paying attention to someone, really paying attention long enough to know exactly what word to say and when to say it, is not a small thing. It's the product of years of small moments nobody was filming. And when it shows up on camera, even in something as minor as a joke about slippery shower floors, audiences feel the difference. They may not be able to explain why the moment felt warm, but they can feel it. There's also something quietly touching about the specific fear Kelly named. She didn't say something abstract. She didn't say she worries about aging, or about the future in some vague sense. She named a very ordinary, very human anxiety: slipping in the shower. It's mundane. It's almost funny to say out loud. And that's exactly why it landed. Because most people, if they're honest, have had that exact intrusive thought at some point, usually right after reading a headline about someone falling and getting hurt at home. Kelly just happened to say it out loud, on camera, with her husband sitting right next to her nodding in agreement. It raises an interesting question about why audiences have stayed loyal to this couple for so long, through so many different chapters of their careers. Part of it is obviously familiarity. Viewers have essentially watched Kelly grow up on television, from her earlier hosting years through marriage, motherhood, and now this newer era of co-hosting alongside her husband. But familiarity alone doesn't explain the emotional pull. Plenty of long-running hosts have that same sense of history with their audience and still don't generate this kind of reaction to a 30-second clip about body oil. What seems to set Kelly and Mark apart is that they let these unscripted cracks show. They don't sand down every rough edge before it reaches the audience. When Kelly talks about forgetting something and going back for it, only to nearly slip again, Mark doesn't rush to smooth it over. He just tells her to be careful, the way any husband might, the way you'd say it to someone whose safety actually matters to you in that particular moment, not as a performance of concern but as an automatic reflex. It's tempting to read too much into a single exchange like this, and it's worth being careful there. Nothing about this moment suggests anything alarming or dramatic behind the scenes. It wasn't framed as a health scare. It wasn't presented as some hidden confession about a deeper struggle. It really was, on its surface, exactly what it looked like: two people bantering about a bathroom hazard. But the reason it's worth talking about it all is what it reveals about how comfortable they are being unguarded with each other in front of an audience of millions. That kind of ease doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen quickly. Think about how many public figures spend their entire careers trying to appear effortlessly in sync with a co-host, a partner, a sibling, whoever they're sharing the spotlight with. It's genuinely difficult to fake. Audiences are remarkably good at detecting when banter is manufactured versus when it's real, even if they can't always articulate what tipped them off. With Kelly and Mark, the tell is in the timing. Real couples interrupt each other. Real couples finish sentences with the wrong word on purpose because it's funnier that way. Real couples land on gallows humor about their own mortality and then just move on to the next segment, because that's simply how the relationship has always worked. There's also something worth noting about vulnerability itself, and how rarely we get to see it modeled this. So much of the conversation around long marriages tends to focus on either the fairy tale version, all anniversaries and grand gestures, or the difficult version, all conflict and struggle. What gets left out is this middle ground, the ordinary vulnerability of two people who have simply been paying attention to each other's fears for a very long time. Kelly joking about how she expects to eventually meet her end doesn't sound rehearsed because it isn't. It sounds like something that's probably come up before, maybe more than once in their actual life together, long before a camera was pointed at either of them. And that might be exactly why so many viewers couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't really about the shower or the oil or even the joke itself. It was about watching two people who've spent decades in front of an audience still manage to seem completely present with each other, still finish each other's thoughts, still worry about each other out loud in a way that felt entirely unscripted. It's worth remembering, too, that this moment arrived right after Kelly had been away from the show for 2 weeks. Audiences who tune in daily tend to notice absences, even short ones, and they often bring a heightened attentiveness back with them when a familiar face returns. Some viewers online wondered whether her return felt a little different, a little more grounded after the short break. Nothing was confirmed about the reason for her time away, and it would be unfair to speculate beyond what's actually been shared. But there's a real possibility that any time away from a daily routine, however brief, changes the way someone shows up when they come back to it. It wouldn't be surprising if that played some quiet role in how open the conversation felt that morning. What's clear, without needing to guess at anything unconfirmed, is that the exchange resonated because it felt honest. Kelly wasn't performing fear. She was naming something small and specific and slightly absurd, the way people do with those they trust most, and Mark met her exactly where she was instead of steering the conversation somewhere safer. Maybe that's the real thread running through so many of their memorable moments together, whether it's a story about visiting their daughter at summer camp, a callback to an old inside joke, or a passing comment about slippery bathroom floors. It's never really about the specific topic. It's about watching two people who still seem genuinely tuned into one another after all these years, still willing to let the cameras catch the version of them that isn't polished for television. Perhaps the reason so many people remain invested in Kelly and Mark isn't simply because they've spent decades in the spotlight. It's because audiences continue to see something genuine in the way they navigate life together, even in the smallest, most ordinary exchanges. A joke about a shower floor probably shouldn't mean much on its own. But when it comes from two people who've clearly been paying close attention to each other for a very long time, it starts to mean a little more than it should. And maybe that's why moments like this stay with viewers long after the cameras stop rolling. So here's a question worth sitting with. What is it about the small, unscripted moments between two people that feels more convincing than any grand romantic gesture ever could? Is it the timing? The honesty? The fact that nobody planned it? If you've watched Kelly and Mark share these little exchanges over the years, what's the one that stuck with you the most? Was it this one about the shower floor and the obituary joke nobody asked for? Or was it something else entirely, a look, a laugh, a moment where you could just tell they were more in sync than the segment ever needed them to be? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes the smallest moments end up saying the most.